Chapter 67 of The Maid of Sker. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Maid of Sker by Bardie Blackmore. Chapter 67. Dog Eats Dog. To a man whose time of life begins to be a subject of some consideration to him, when the few years still in hope can be counted on a hand, and may not need a finger, and with the tide of this world ebbing to the inevitable sea, to him there is scarcely any sweet and gentle pastime more delightful than to sit on a bank of ancient moss beside a tidal river, and watch the decreasing waters, and prove his own eternity by casting a pebble into them. Hence it was that Sir Philip Bampfylde, on the very morning after I gave him back his grandchild, sat gazing into the ebb of the Tawe, some 50 yards below the spot whence Jack Wildman's father carried off so wickedly that helpless pair of children. Here it was my privilege to come up to Sir Philip, and spread before him my humble reasons for having preferred the kitchen last night to the dining room and the drawing room. It was consistent with my nature, and he, though wishing otherwise, agreed not to be offended. Then I asked him how the young lady, whose health every one of us had honoured all over the kitchen table, had contrived to pass the night, and whether she had seen her father yet. He said she had slept pretty well, considering, but that as concerned her father, they had not thought it wise to let her see him until the doctor came. There was no telling how it might act upon Squire Philip's constitution, after so many years of misery, cobwebs, and desolation. For Providence had not gifted him with a mind so strong as his father's was, and the sudden break in on the death of the mind has been known in such a case to lead to bodily decease. But few things vexed the General more than that wretched lie of Chowne's, and slander upon a loyal family while in service of the Crown. What Captain Drake had landed from the boat was not an arm chest, but a chest of plate and linen, belonging to his brother, which he would no longer borrow, while the Squire so cruelly dealt with him. Then I asked Sir Philip whether the ancient builder over at Appledore had been sent for to depose to the boat, for we had brought that little craft on the top of our coach from Ilfracombe. The General said that I might see him even now examining her, if I would only take the trouble to look round the corner; but he himself was so well convinced, without any further testimony, that he did not even care to hear what the old man had to say of it, any more than he cared for the jemmyset. This, however, is not my manner of regarding questions, not from any private fountains of conviction, and so on, but out of the mouths of many witnesses shall a thing be established. Therefore I hastened round the corner to sift this ancient boatwright. As surly a fellow as ever lived, and from his repugnance to my uniform, one who had made more money, I doubt, by the smuggler's keg than the shipwright's adze. Entering into his nature at sight, I took the upper hand of him, as my rank insisted on. "Hark ye now, Master Ship Carpenter, where was this little craft put together, according to your opinion?" Either this fellow was deaf as a post, or else he meant to insult me, for he took no more notice of me than he did of the pigs that were snuffling at beech nuts down by the side of the landing place. I am not the right man to put up with insolence. Therefore I screwed my hammer head into the socket below my muscles, and therewith dealt him a tap on his hat, just to show what might come afterwards. Receiving this administration, and seeing that more was very likely from the same source to be available, what did this rogue do but endeavour to show the best side of his manners? Wherefore, to let him have his say, here is his opinion. This here boat be the same as I built, year as my wife were took with quinsy, and were called home by the Lord. I built her for Wild Duck of Appledore, a little dandy rigged craft, as used to be hired by Cap'n Bampfylde. To this here boat I can swear, although some big rogue have been at work painting her, as knew not how to paint, and a lubber, no doubt, every now and then patching her up, or repairing of her. The name in her stern have been painted up from Wild Duck Appledore into Santa Lucia Salvador. 3 or 4 letters are my own, the rest are the work of some pirate. She be no more foreign built than I be, but a sailor accustomed to foreign parts would be sure to reckon so. Reason why I serve my time with a builder over to Port au Prince, and I should like to see the man anywhere round these here parts as can tuck in the bends as I does." Leaving this conceited fellow to his narrow unpleasantness, I turned my head, and there beheld Captain Bluett hearkening. "Come," he cried out, in his hearty manner, "what a cook's boiling of fools we are! Here we are chewing a long chewed quid, while the devil that brewed this gale of wind may fly far away and grin at us. Llewellyn, do you mean to allow—" "Hush!" I said softly, for that low shipwright showed his eyes coming up under his cap, and I saw that he was that particular villain, after his scurrilous words about me, who would sell his soul to that wretch of a Chowne for half a crown a week almost. Therefore I led our young Captain Bluett well away out of this fellow's hearing. "Davy," said he, "we all know your courage, your readiness, and your resources. Still you appear to be under a spell, and you know you are superstitious about this cunning and cowardly blackguard, who frightens the whole of this country, as he never could frighten Glamorganshire." "I have no fear of him, sir," I said. "I will go with you to confront him." "Why, your teeth are ready to chatter, Llewellyn, and your lips are blue. You who stood like a milestone, they tell me, at the helm of the Goliath, or like a clock going steadily tick, before we fired a shot, and with both shell and shot through your grey whiskers. But, Captain, a minister of the Lord—" "Master, a minister of the devil. Once for all to day, I go to horsewhip him, if he is young enough, or to pull his nose, if he is old enough, and old Harry be with him in choice of the two. Zounds, sir, is it a thing to laugh at?" Rodney Bluett was well known to every one who served under him for the mildness of his language, and the want of oaths he had; and so of course for his self control, and the power of his heart, when it did break forth. Everybody loved him, because he never cursed any one at a venture, and kept himself very close to facts, however hard driven by circumstances. So that I was now amazed to hear this young man spoil my pipe with violent emotions. "Have you consulted Sir Philip?" I asked. "It is his place to take up the question." "What question? There is no question. The thing is proved. My duty is plain. Sir Philip is too old to see to it. The Squire is a spooney. The Commodore is not here yet. I have spoken to his wife, who is a very sweet and wise lady, and she agrees with me that it will save the family a world of scandal, and perhaps failure of the law, for me to take the law into my own hands, and thrash this blackguard within an inch of his life." "To be sure, and save her husband from the risk of tackling a desperate man. It is most wise on her part. But I beg you, my dear sir, for the sake of your dear uncle and your good mother, keep clear of this quarrel. You know not the man you have to deal with. Even if you can thrash him, which is no easy business, he will shoot you afterwards. He is the deadest shot in the county." "Hurrah!" cried Rodney, tossing up his hat. "That entirely settles it. Come along, old fellow, and show us the way, and not a word to any one." Now this may seem a very mad resolve for a man of my sense to give into; but whether I turned myself this way or that, I could see no chance of bettering it. If I refused to go, young Rodney, as I could see by the set of his mouth, would go alone, and perhaps get killed. And then how could any of the family ever look at me again? On the other hand, if I should go to the Colonel or to the General for opinion, and to beg them to stop it, my interference, 9 chances to 1, would only end in giving offence among the superior orders. Add to this my real desire to square it out with Chowne himself, after all his persecution, and you may be able to forgive me for getting upon horseback, after many years of forbearance, and with my sugar nipper screwed on, to lay hold by the forestay, if she should make bad weather. Also, I felt it my duty to take a double-barrelled pistol, heavily loaded and well primed. Captain Rodney forged ahead so on a real hunting craft, that my dapple grey, being warranted not to lurch me overboard, could not keep in line, whatever sail I made upon her. My chief rule in life is not to hurry, what good ever comes of it. People only abuse you, and your breath is too short to answer them. Moreover, I felt an uneasy creaking in my bends, from dousing forward, and then easing backward, as a man must do who knows how to ride. The captain was wroth with me, out of all reason; but as he could not find the way to Nympton Moors without me, I was enabled to take my leisure, having the surety of overgetting him when the next cross road came. Therefore it was late afternoon when we turned into the black fir grove, which led up to the house of Chowne, and Rodney Bluett clutched the big whip in his hand severely, for we had asked at the little inn, of which I spoke a long time ago, whether the Parson was now at home. "Ay, that un be," said the man with a grin, for we did not see the landlady; "but ye best way not to go nigh un." Already I seemed not to feel as I hoped in the earlier stage of the journey. My thoughts had been very upright for a while, and spirited, and delighted. But now I began to look at things from a different point of view almost. It is not man's business to worry his head about righting of wrongs in this world, unless they are done to himself. And if so, revenge is its name, and an ugly one. Long life leads one to forgive, when to carry it on would be troublesome. Through the drip of dying leaves the chill of dull November now began to darken over us, as we turned the corner of Chowne's own road, and faced his lonely mansion. The house had a heavy and sullen look, according to my ideas, not receiving light and pleasure of the sun, when possible. Heavy fir trees overhung it, never parting with their weight; and the sunset, when there was any, could not pierce the holm oaks. "What a gloomy and devilish place!" cried Rodney Bluett, beginning to tremble from some unknown influence. "Upon my soul, if I lived here, I should be hatching plots myself. Or is it the nature of the man that has made the place so horrible?" "Let us go back," said I. "Come back, my good sir, I conjure you. Such a man should be left to God, to punish in His own good time." "Hark!" cried Rodney, pulling up and listening through the gloomy wood. "That was a woman's scream, I am sure. Is he murdering some more little ones?" We listened, and heard a loud piercing shriek, that made our hair stand on end almost, so mad was it, and so unearthly. And then 2 more, of yet wilder agony; and after that a long low wailing. "On, on!" cried Rodney Bluett. "You know these paths. Gallop on, Davy." "You go first," I answered. "Your horse is fresher. I am coming, to be sure I am. Do you think I am frightened?" "Well, I don't know," he replied; "but I am not ashamed to own that I am." Clapping spurs to his horse, he dashed on; and thoroughly miserable as I felt, there was nothing for me but to follow him. In the name of the Lord, what a sight we came on! Where the drive sweeps round at the corner of the house, under a dark tree of some sort, and on a garden bench, we discovered the figures of 2 women. Or rather, one sat on the bench, the other lay stretched on the ground, with her head cast recklessly back on the ledge, her hair spread in masses over it, and both hands pressed on her eyes and ears, to shut out sight and hearing. Her lips were open, and through her white teeth came wails of anguish, that would have been shrieks if nature had not failed her. But the elder woman sat upright, in scorn of all such weakness, with her gaunt figure drawn like a cable taut; no sign of a tear on her shrunken cheeks, and the whole of her face as numb and cold as an iced figurehead in the Arctic seas. Yet no one with knowledge of the human race could doubt which of these 2 suffered most. We reined up our horses, and gazed in terror, for neither of them noticed us. And then we heard from inside the house sounds that made our flesh creep; barking, howling, snapping of teeth, baying as of a human bloodhound, frothy splutterings of fury, and then smothered yelling. "Her have a gat 'un now," cried a clown, running round the end of the house as if he were enjoying it. "Reckon our Passon won't bate much more after Passon Jack be atop of 'un." "Oh, sir! Oh, sir! Oh, for God's sake, sir!" cried the poor lady who had lain on the ground, rushing up to us and kneeling and trying to get hold of us. "You must have come to stop it, sir. Only 1 hour. Allow him 1 hour, dear, dear sirs, for repentance. He has not been a good man, I know, but I am his own wife, good kind sirs, and if he could only have a little time, if it were only half an hour, he might." Here a sound of throttling came through a broken window pane, and down she fell insensible. "What does it mean?" cried Rodney Bluett. "Is it murder, madness, or suicide? Follow me, Davy. Here I go, anyhow, into the thick of it." He dashed through the window, and I, with more caution, cocking my pistol, followed him, while I heard the clown shouting after us, "Danged vools, both of 'ee, bide outside, I tell 'ee." Oh, that we had remained outside! I have been through a great deal of horrible sights, enough to harden any man, and cure him of womanly squeamishness; yet never did I behold or dream of anything so awful as the scene that lay before me. People were longing to look at it now, but none save ourselves durst enter. It was Chowne's own dining room, all in the dark, except where a lamp had been brought in by a trembling footman, who ran away, knowing that he brought this light for his master to be strangled by. And in the corner now lay his master, smothered under a feather bed, yet with his vicious head fetched out in the last rabid struggle to bite. There was the black hair, black face, and black tongue, shown by the frothy wainscot, or between it and the ticking. On the feather bed lay exhausted, and with his mighty frame convulsed, so that a child might master him, Parson Jack Rambone, the strongest man, whose strength, like all other powers, had laid a horrible duty upon him. Sobbing with all his great heart he lay, yet afraid to take his weight off, and sweating at every pore with labour, peril of his life, and agony. "Oh, Dick, Dick," he said quite softly, and between his pantings, "how many larks have we had together, and for me to have to do this to you! I am sure you knew me before you died. I think you know me now, Dick. Oh, for God's sake, shut your eyes. Darling Dick, are you dead? Are you dead? You are the very cleverest fellow ever I came across of. You can do it if you like. Oh, dear Dick, Dick, my boy, do shut your eyes." We stood looking at them, with no power to go up to them. All experience failed us as to what was the proper thing to do, till I saw that Chowne's face ought to have a napkin over it. None had been laid for dinner, but I knew where butlers keep them. When I had done this, Parson Jack, who could not escape from the great black eyes, arose and said, "I thank you, sir." He staggered so that we had to support him, but not a word could we say to him. "I am bitten in 2 places, if not more," he rather gasped than said to us, as he laid bare his enormous arms. "I care not much. I will follow my friend; or if the Lord should please to spare me, henceforth I am an altered man. And yet, for the sake of my family, will you heat the kitchen poker?" End of chapter 67. Chapter 68 of The Maid of Sker. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Maid of Sker by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 68. The Old Pitcher at the Well again. It helps a thoughtless man on his road towards a better kingdom to get a glimpse, every now and then, of such visitations of the Lord. When I was a little boy, nothing did me so much good in almost all the Bible as to hear my father read the way in which Herod was eaten of worms. And now, in mature years, I received quite a serious turn by the death of this Parson Chowne, of ignominious canine madness; and still more when I came to know by what condign parental justice this visitation smote him. But while the women were busy upstairs by candlelight, and with some weeping, It fell to Parson Rambone's lot to lay the truth before us. This great man took at once to Captain Rodney Bluett, as if he had known him for years, nor did he fail to remember me, and in his distress to seek some comfort from my simple wisdom. So, having packed all the country boobies, constables, doctors, and so on out of the house, we barred the door, made a bright fire in the kitchen, and sat down in front of it, while a nice cook began to toss up some sweetbreads, and eggs, and ham collops, and so on, for our really now highly necessary sustenance. You may remember the time I met with a very nice fellow, then Chowne's head groom, who gave me a capital supper of tripe, elegantly stewed by a young cookmaid, himself lamenting the stress laid upon him by circumstances, not to make his wife of her. He told me then, with a sigh of affection between his knife and fork, that social duties compelled him instead to marry a publican's daughter, with £50 down on the nail, he believed, if it was a penny. Nevertheless, he felt confident that all would be ordered aright in the end. Now Providence had not allowed such a case of faith to pass unrewarded. He married the publican's daughter, got her money, and paid the last sad duties to her out of the pocket of his father-in-law in a Christian-minded manner. And then back he came to Nympton Rectory, and wedded that same cookmaid, who now was turning our ham so cleverly with the egg slice. Thus we could speak before them both, without the least constraint; and indeed he helped us much by his knowledge of the affairs of the family. Also 2 justices of the peace, who had signed the warrant for poor Chowne's end, upon the report of the doctors, but could find no one of strength and courage to carry it out except Parson Jack. These sat with us to get their supper, before the long cold ride over the moors. And there sat Parson Jack himself, with his thick hands trembling, hopeless of eating a morsel, but dreading to be left alone for a moment. "What a difference it will make in all this neighbourhood, to be sure!" so said one of their worships. "Ay, that it will," answered his brother magistrate. "Since Tom Faggus died, there has not been such a man to be found nowhere round these here parts." "No, nor Tom Faggus himself," said the other; "a noble highwayman he were, but for mind, not fit to hold a candle to our lamented friend, now lying up there in the counterpane." Parson Jack shuddered, and shook his great limbs, and feigned to have done so on purpose; and then in defiance collected himself, and laid his iron hand on the table, watching every great muscle, to see how long he could keep it from trembling. Then I arose and grasped his hand, for nobody else understood him at all; and he let me take it with reluctance, wonder, and then deep gratitude. He had been saying to himself, as I knew, though his lips never moved, and his face was set, in scorn of all our moralising, within himself he had been thinking, "I am Jack Ketch. I am worse. I am Cain. I have murdered my own dear brother." And I, who had seen him brand his bitten arm with the red hot poker, laying the glowing iron on until the blood hissed out at it, I alone could gauge the strength of heart that now enabled him to answer my grasp with his poor scorched arm, and to show his great tears, and check them. Enough of this. I cannot stand these melancholy subjects. A man of irreproachable life, with a tendency towards gaiety, never must allow his feelings to play ducks and drakes with him. If the justice of the Almighty fell upon Chowne, as I said it would, let Chowne die, and let us hope that his soul was not past praying for. It is not my place to be wretched, because the biggest villain I ever knew showed his wit by dying of a disease which gave him power to snap at the very devil. when in the fullness of time he should come thirsting to lay hold of him. And but for my purpose of proving how purely justice does come home to us, well contented would I be to say no more about him. Why had he been such a villain through life? Because he was an impostor. Why did he die of rabid madness under the clutch of his own best friend? Because he lashed his favourite hound to fly at the throat of his own grandfather. Not only does it confirm one's faith in the honesty of breeding, but it enables me to acquit all the Chownes of Devonshire, and a fine and wholesome race they are, of ever having produced such a scamp in true course of legitimacy. Also enables me not to point out so much as to leave all my readers to think of the humble yet undeniable traces of old Davy's sagacity. What had I said to Mrs Steelyard, when she overbore me so upon an empty stomach? "Madam," I said, "your son, you mean?" And it proved to be one of my famous hits at a range beyond that of other men. When great stirs happen, truth comes out, as an earthquake starts the weasels. Everybody knows what fine old age those wandering gypsies come to. The two most killing cares we have are money and reputation. Here behold gypsy wisdom. The disregard of the latter of the two does away with the plague of the former. They take what they want, while we clumsy fellows toil for the cash, as the only way to get the good estimation. Hence it was that Chowne's grandfather came about stealing as lively as ever at the age of 90. A wiry and leathery man he was, and had once been a famous conjurer. And now in his old age he came to sleep in his grandson's barn, and to live on his grandson's ducks, potatoes, and pigeons. This was last harvest time, just as Chowne was enjoying his bit of cub hunting. Turning in from his sport one day, in a very sulky humour with the hounds he was educating, the Parson caught his grandfather withdrawing in a quiet manner from a snug little hen roost. Not knowing who it was, for his mother had never explained a thing to him, not even that she was his mother, he thought it below his dignity to ride after this old fellow. But at his heels stalked a tall young hound, who had vexed him all day by surliness, and was now whipped in for punishment. "At him, Loo boy!" he called out. "Hike for'ard! Catch him by the leg, boy!" But the hound only showed his teeth and snarled, so that Chowne let out his long lash at him. In a moment the dog sprang at his master, who was riding a low cob horse, and bit him in the thigh, and the horse in the shoulder, and then skulked off to his kennel. The hound was shot, and the horse shared his fate in less than 6 weeks afterwards. And as for the Parson, we know too well what they were forced to do with him. In her first horror, that stony woman, even Mrs Steelyard, when her son came ravening at her, could not keep her secret. "It is the judgment of God," she cried. "After all, there is a God. He set the dogs at his grandfather, and now he would bite his own mother." How she had managed to place him in the stead of the real Chowne heir, I never heard, or at least no clear account of it. For she was not, as we know already, one who would answer questions. Let him rest, whoever he was. His end was bad enough even for him. Enough of this fright, for it was a fright even to me, I assure you. Let us come back to the innocent people, injured so long by his villainy. To begin with, Parson Jack. Never in all his life had he taken a stroke towards his own salvation, until, by that horrible job, he earned repentance, fear, and conscience. And not only this, for none of these would have stood him in any service with Chowne still at his elbow, but that the face, which had drawn him for years like a lodestone of hell to destruction, now ever present in its terror, till his prayers got rid of it, shone in the dark like the face of a scarecrow, if ever he durst think of wickedness. His wife found the benefit of this change, and so did his growing family, and so did the people who flocked to his church, in the pleasure of being afraid of him. In the roads he might bite, but in his surplice he was bound to behave himself, or at least he must bite the churchwarden first. Yet no one would have him to sprinkle a child until a whole year was over, and then he restored himself under a hint from a man beyond him in intellect. He made everybody allow that the poker had entirely cured him, by preaching from the bottom of his chest, with a glass of water upon the cushion, a sermon that stirred every heart, with the text, "Is thy servant a dog, that he should do this thing?" I quit him with sorrow, because I found him a man of true feeling and good tobacco. We got on together so warmly that expense alone divided us. He would have had me for parish clerk, if I could have seen my way to it. What prevails with a man like me, foremost, first of everything? Why, love of the blessed native land, which every good Welshman will love me for. I may have done a thing now and then below our native dignity, except to those who can enter into all the things we look at. It is not our nature altogether to go for less than our value. We know that we are of the oldest blood to be found in this ancient island, and we ask nothing more than to be treated as the superior race should be. In the presence of such great ideas, who cares what becomes of me? I really feel that my marriage to Polly, and prolongation of a fine old breed, scarcely ought to be spoken of. A man who has described the battle of the Nile need not dwell on matrimony. Hurried speech does not become me on any subject. Everybody has the right to know, and everybody does know, how the whole of North Devon was filled with joy, talk, and disputation as to Commodore Bampfylde and the brightness of his acquittal. They drew him from Barnstaple in a chaise, with only 2 springs broken, men having taken the horses out, and done their best at collar work. He would have gladly jumped out and kicked them, but for the feeling of their good will. Nothing would have detracted from this, and the feasts that were felt to be due upon it, if Squire Philip had only known how not to die, at a time when nobody was seasonably called on to think of death. But when he learned the shame inflicted by himself on his ancient race, through trusting Chowne, and misbelieving his brother, out of the selfsame wound, and above all, when he learned that Chowne was the bastard of a gipsy, he cast himself into his brother's arms, fetched one long sigh, and departed to a better world with his hat on. This was the best thing that he could do, if he had chosen the time aright, and it saved a world of trouble. Sir Philip felt it a good bit, of course, and so did Sir Drake Bampfylde. Nevertheless, if a living man withdraws into a shell so calmly, what can he expect more lively than his undertakers? This was good, and left room for Harry, or rather young Philip Bampfylde, to step into the proper shoes, and have practice how to walk in them. Yet he was so caught with love of service and of the navy, and so mad about Nelson, that the General could not help himself, but let him go to sea again. Nelson is afloat just now. The Crappos and the Dons appear to have made up their minds against us, and the former have the insolence to threaten a great invasion. If I only had 2 arms, I would leave my Polly to howl about me. As it is, they have turned me into a herring. Colonel Lougher has raised a regiment, and I am first drill sergeant. Our dear Maid of Sker would also give her beautiful son, only 6 months old, Bampfylde Lougher Bluett, to go to the wars, and to fight the French, If anyone could only show her the way to do without him. He cocks up his toes in a manner which proves that his feet are meant for ratlines. How the war is raging! I run to and fro upon hearing of Felix Farley's journal, and am only fit to talk of it. Sir Philip comes down with his best tobacco whenever he stops at Candleston, and a craft has been built for me on purpose by the old fellow at Appledore, and her name it is the Maid of Sker, to dance across the Channel whenever a one-armed man can navigate. Colonel Lougher and even Lady Bluett have such trust in me that they cross if their dear Delushy seems to pine too much for her husband. And the maid herself has brought her son, as proud as if he came out of a wreck, to exhibit him to Moxy, and Roger, and Bunny, and Stradling the clerk; in a word, to all the parish, and the extra parochial district. Now I hope that nobody will ask me any more questions concerning any one, male or female. If I cannot speak well of a person, my rule is to be silent. Hezekiah found his knavery altogether useless. He scraped himself home at last, and built a bellows organ at Bridgend, with a 74-gun crash to it. His reputation is therefore up, especially since he rejoined the Church, in all churches that can afford him. Yet he will not always own that I was his salvation. Hepzibah prophesies nothing, except that Polly's little son, David Llewellyn, will do something wonderful to keep the ancient name up. It may be so, and I think that he will, but his father never did it. How many chances have I missed? How many times might I have advanced to stern respectability? Yet some folk will like me better, and I like myself no less, for not having feigned to be more than I am, a poor frail fellow. The children still come down to the well, with 3 of our Bunnies foremost. They get between my knees, and open blue or brown eyes up at me. In spite of Roger Berkrolles nodding to instil more manners, some of the prettiest stroke my white beard, coaxing for a story. Then they push forward little Davy, thinking that I spoil him so, because of his decided genius giving such promise of bardhood. Already it would do you good to hear him on the Jew's harp. Nevertheless, I answer firmly, 9 times out of 10 at least, "Little dears," is all I say. Captain Davy is getting old. It is hard to tell a tale, but easy to find fault with it. You tell me that my left arm will grow quite as long as my right one, if I only will shake it about, and keep a hollow sleeve on. My pets, when I get another arm, I will tell you another story. End of chapter 68. The end of The Maid of Sker by R.D. Blackmore.